My name is Souad Talsi. I was born in a small town called Oujda in Morocco, northeast on the Algerian borders in 1960. And I had therefore my formative years in Morocco and came to the UK in 1972 with my mother and my siblings, 3 brothers. My father came in late 60s.
So your mother came here before?
No, my mother came with us in the 70s, but my father had come here earlier with the work permit. At the time, there was a huge influx of Moroccans, Portuguese, and Spanish people coming to the UK for jobs, mainly in the catering and the hotel industry. It's awfully difficult to leave your friends, your school, your culture, and everything else that you've always known at the age of 12 to come to a completely different foreign land, different language, different weather. Absolutely everything was very different. But having said that, it wasn't a shock. It wasn't a surprise either. I think when you have a very strong family, it sort of holds it together. So for me, it was a smooth settlement. We had a decent home with a garden in Lancaster Road, 226 Lancaster Road, opposite the convent, the Little Sisters of the Assumption Catholic convent. And I went to Ladbroke School, which is around the corner. Arriving at school, I could see there were mainly white girls of probably Irish descent, West Indian girls, and some of the Spanish girls and the Portuguese girls and the Moroccan girls had been there already before me, and of course they had the opportunity of knowing English before because they had arrived before. So it was a little bit difficult in terms initially to settle at school because I didn't speak the language, and I remember putting what they called special English for about 6 months before I could join the mainstream classes, maths and English and geography and other.
226 Lancaster Road. Is it a council flat?
No. It was a privately owned Victorian house where the landlady was Italian. She lived on the first floor. We had the garden flat. Above her, there were 2 other Moroccan families. So we had our own accommodation. And I missed very much the first year, I think, my friends, because it was just, I just felt I was uprooted completely, and it was very difficult for me as a person to settle. But I think once you are in a position to communicate, then that makes the process of settlement much easier.
So growing up, the climate affect the cold, etc.? In those days, there was no central heating, I think.
There was no central heating, and I think the cold climate probably was a welcome in a sense, because I come from a sort of, it's almost a Saharan type of weather we have in Oujda. It can be very, very hot. So it didn't really bother me, the cold weather at all. What bothered me possibly is the lack of opportunities to buy even the mere vegetables to make a couscous with my mother, for example, because Portobello Road wasn't what it is now. So there were cultural aspects that I had missed at the time. But slowly, Moroccan life began in the Gorbon and the Portobello area. And as you can see now, there isn't one street within the Gorbon ward where you don't see an aspect of Moroccan life, be it a shop or a grocery or hairdresser or whatever.
So in the early 70s, and you were growing up, what was generally, where did you go did you go out with friends in the area or something? Describe us the area. What you remember of it?
The area, Swimbrook wasn't what it is now. They were very old Victorian houses where a lot of Moroccans, Spanish and Portuguese lived in multi-occupancy. So you had like shared toilets or bathrooms even. And you had one room occupied at times by a family of maybe 2 or 3. Dreadful housing conditions at the time. And the reason why these people came to this area is because their jobs were in sort of central London, and the cheapest housing was available in North Kent and North Westminster, hence the condensed concentration of Moroccans in North Westminster, just across the canal from here and in this part. It was very different because you didn't see, it wasn't as multi-ethnic as it is now. There were the Irish, the West Indian. Of course, within the West Indian, there were the Jamaicans, Grenada, but mainly people from Trinidad, St. Lucia also. Portuguese, mainly from Madeira. And the Spanish, either Andalusia or Galicia. There were a lot of what we would call gallegos. It was a peaceful upbringing. What was so good about it is that we lived at peace with each other in that sense. And as a Muslim, Islam was in my heart as it is today. I lived it. I didn't talk about it. That's the difference, you see. We lived Islam. We helped our neighbors. We did not distinguish who was wearing or who wasn't wearing a scarf. We didn't make a fuss. Neither did the host community. It was just a peaceful time. It saddens me now to see the big fuss made about, from both sides, about how we're supposed to act or not. How even the language has changed. You know, in some Moroccan families, we used to say Sabah al-Khair, which is good morning. Now it's Assalamu alaikum. So the whole connotation, it's become really heavy in that sense. And I think the 9/11 impact
We'll come to that in a minute.
Has had quite a...
So you finished your school and you went to university here? Or?
Yes, I finished school, and from an early, my father was quite a militant. And it wasn't purely economical reasons why he came here. We were okay in Morocco. We had a shop for children's clothing, but he wanted to do something different. And so when he came here, he spoke 3 languages, and he felt able and better equipped to assist and encourage and support other Moroccan families. So he used to, he was involved in one of the Moroccan organization, the welfare organization called Widadias. And he used to take me with him. And that's where the idea came from, how to empower your local community. And at a later stage, he would ask me to go and interpret for my uncles. I had so many uncles. And it was mainly at the Housing Action Centre or the Citizen Advice Bureau at the Westway. And when I had my A-levels, I decided to volunteer at the Citizen Advice Bureau. And then I became a full-time advice worker for Arabic-speaking community in North Kensington. That was back in 1980. But I continued my studies. Then I interrupted my studies because I had my first child. I got married in 1982. I was, I think, 21. I had my daughter, and then I went back to university at Birkbeck, and I finished my degree, my law degree. I actually wanted to be a solicitor, but I never went through the process because what I wanted to do was empowering people in a sort of, I wanted to do social law rather than criminal law in that sense. And I didn't think, and I still don't think it was necessary then to qualify as solicitor if I could represent people in social security tribunals, employment tribunals, and immigration. And I think by virtue of being Moroccan, I began to specialize in immigration. And I had a huge amount of casework from the Arabic community generally, where I did immigration and nationality. I am actually on a sabbatical from the CAB. I haven't left Kensington Citizen Advice Bureau yet. It's been about 30 years now as a...
So when did you get involved with women's politics? And
I think growing up as the only girl amongst 3 brothers, and having a wonderful dad who's never made a difference He's never distinguished me from my brothers. If he went out, he asked me to come with him. But I could see there was a difference the way my colleagues, my friends were treated. And so I've always felt that there was no difference between me and my brothers. We had equal brains, and that my gender shouldn't be an issue or an obstacle to me doing what it is that I want to do. And working in the CAB from an early age, I realized that, for example, a lot of Moroccan women were missing out because of the language and the cultural barriers, missing out on accessing health services, for example. And so I got involved in different groups. I became a social council, not in his social council. It's now Kensington and Chelsea Social Council. At the time, it was not in his social council. Became a member of the management committee, and then also became a management committee member of the law centre. And in 1985, as a social council member, we moved the motion of creating the Moroccan Coordinating Committee, MCC. And on one condition that within that project, there'll be a particular area that looks at the women's welfare only. And we did that, and it was at 61 Goulburn Road, only closed, I think, about 2 years ago. But within a short period of time, there was a lot of antagonism with the way we wanted to deal with our Moroccan women project within the MCC. So we pulled out, and we went to Thorpe Close as volunteers, and that's when Hassaniya, I gave it the name. Hassaniya actually means doing good. It comes from the word Hassan, to do good. And the project was really to assist, encourage, and support Moroccan women and Arabic-speaking women access services otherwise denied to them through ignorance of, through cultural or language barriers that they would suffer. So I've always, as a woman, I've always felt that we don't get a great deal of fairness in the Muslim world. I discovered the Muslim world living in the UK, not living in Morocco. I discovered that Islam isn't the thing that makes up your whole identity. That Muslim women were treated differently in accordance with their own cultural background. And, a Saudi woman isn't a Moroccan woman because we have different cultures to a certain degree. I'm African as well as Arab. A Bosnian woman may have the same faith as a Pakistani woman, but they're different because they have cultural... and so Muslim women suffered, I think, different discriminations across the Muslim world. But what is so interesting is how the West decided to interpret Islam and how it affects us as women. And I marvel at the idea when they talk in the newspapers or in the media about Muslim women. What is a Muslim woman? Do we ever say a Catholic woman, for example?
So when you set up this women's center, did you have any problems with the men folk? Or?
Oh, absolutely. Terrible. First of all, the management committee, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but there was a tribunal case, that released the funds that were initially allocated for the women's project. And afterwards, once we set up, when we moved here in January 1991, a lot of Moroccan men didn't accept a Moroccan women's center because they felt that too much empowerment would lead to a lot of divorces. So there was this kind of misconception that it's no good telling women to tell women their rights. Little they know, because historically speaking, Moroccan women have always been very independent. And when we fought the French in equal measure as our male counterparts, it's not like Moroccan women have always been hidden away. We're discreet, but we're certainly not. There is a voice. It may be muffled at times, but they are strong women. So it was quite a challenge. And the more they resisted, the more I was determined to keep the center going, and brought in more women, Moroccan women. And I'm very, very, very privileged to work here still with fantastic Moroccan young girls who are born and brought up in the UK, completed their degrees, whether in law and other subjects, and are running the center.
Okay, I want to just go back a little. You know, you first came and you stayed in 226
Yeah.
Lancaster Road, was it?
Yeah.
Did your family move again from there?
Yes, we did. We
Tell us
did.
about that.
We moved out because the landlady was selling and she was going back to Italy. She was Italian. And then I think my father approached the council and we were given a 4-bedroom in Homefield House just across from this building. So we lived in amongst some few Moroccan families, but mainly West Indian and Irish families and English families in Homefield House back in the 70s.
So, and then how long did you live in Homefield House?
I lived until I got married and moved into Cromer Road. And that was back sort of, I think, possibly 7 years.
So you got an arranged marriage or?
No, we don't do arranged marriage in Morocco.
Okay. So how did you get married?
Marriage is, well, I'll tell you about mine in a moment, but in Morocco, people sort of, they get people together. Because there are no, at the time, there were no clubs or anything.
It's like matchmaking. Yeah.
Matchmaking, but it's not an arranged marriage.
Yeah,
in my case, so my husband fell in love with him and I asked him to marry me. It was as simple as that.
This all happened in London?
Yeah. And he's Moroccan, so it was for me, it was, my family didn't have anything to do with it. It was entirely my decision.
So when you moved to Homefield House, you stayed there for the rest of your life and then you got married and you moved out, but your family, your parents stayed there?
My parents stayed there and I came back in the sense because once my daughter was born, she was staying at mum's because I was working and studying and doing a lot of community work. So I remained here until my siblings also decided to, my youngest brother went to university and then moved to Dubai. He's still in Dubai working there as a telecommunication director for an American company. My other brother became a police officer and moved out. He's now left the police and he actually owns a small business in Goulburn Road. My eldest brother moved out altogether to Southfields. And
where do your parents live? Are they alive?
Well, my father isn't with us, unfortunately. He's left us, Allah yarhamou. My mother is with us. She lives with my eldest brother and tours around. Sometimes she's in Norway visiting my sister. Sometimes she's in Dubai. Sometimes, so she's, that kind of extended family culture is still with us. And I think it's very important.
Your experience of this area has been good on the whole.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think, I can't vouch for the whole 8,000 Moroccans, but generally it's a wonderful, wonderful area. I think the West Indian had a different experience, hence the riots and what have you. But I think the Moroccan community has been very, very fortunate to live in this area. We've just had, I can't remember ever in my 30 years CAB work having a Moroccan come into the Citizen Advice Bureau in order to complain about racism.
But because of this tension with Muslim and all, do you think things have got worse than 80s or better?
Yeah, things are much, much worse. They are at their worst.
How?
I think 9/11 has had a tremendous impact on all that is Muslim in Britain.
In what way? I mean,
in the way we see ourselves as well as how the host community sees us. As a Moroccan, I've always said that I'm so glad my dad, if he had to immigrate, he immigrated to Britain because I've always felt very, very comfortable. My ethnicity or my color never made a difference. I never suffered racism. But that racism is back, is now present rather than back. Present on our cards. And just last week we had a workshop here and the women were telling me how they were spat on because they wore scarves, how the bus wouldn't stop for them because they were wearing scarves, and they were determined. It wasn't just one woman's testimony. There were about 5 or 6 all saying that racism is really and that's quite scary. What concerns me as a mother is the way our third generation born and bred in the UK see themselves and they identify with this Islam that is probably foreign to their own mothers, let alone to their own country of origin, if you like. An Islam that's quite aggressive and very poignant in its interpretation. The girls who wear niqab, for example, what for?
So both sides have become more extreme.
Both sides have become very, very extreme. I don't know what the answer is. Possibly the answer would be to look at the foreign policy, because there is a foreign impact. You cannot deny what's happening in Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq. You can't, because children go onto the internet and they find out anyway. It's no longer the time when you wait at 6 o'clock and watch the BBC. News is available. Propaganda is available in abundance on both sides. What we have to do as British Muslims, if you like, is really to look at it from a British context and see how it is that we can save our future generation from misunderstanding of Islam. Islam is about tolerance. That's how I was brought up. I wasn't brought up to talk about Islam, but to practice Islam. And I think Islam, like other religions, Judaism or Christianity, is teach you to be a good human being. You can't go wrong by being a decent human being. That's Islam for me, is to be tolerant and help those who cannot help themselves. We're standing in the Moroccan garden, which was built and officially opened in 2007 in North Kensington. This is the end of Goulburn Road, and it's really our contribution, our small contribution as a community, to say thank you very much to the residents of Kensington and Chelsea for having us the last 45 to 48 years. It's a wonderful garden. It boasts of different trees and herbs and shrubs that our Moroccan gardens are familiar with. And it's for the whole community to use, and it's great to see the elderly, the young, kids from school coming in throughout the year doing their projects and stuff. And it's just a beautiful piece of green area that is used by so many people in Kensington.